So while I do 100% believe you felt that feeling, because I've been there and I felt it, I look at it and I think, I am so grateful that my brain and my body and my species has developed in a way that I can feel this feeling anytime I am with a group of people, and I love this and I want to share this feeling and I want to give so many people this feeling. And I'm so grateful for evolution allowing me to feel that feeling. Other people, they say, I believe that God gives me that feeling. 100% of the proceeds gained from this monetized episode will be donated to sciencesaves.org. Thanks for listening.
To that point, Sydney, and I know it's your show. I don't want to hijack it. You can
No,
cut
you're
this part
good.
out
You're
if you
good.
like. I want to ask you a question. So
Sure.
I listen to a lot of your guests, and again, they make great points. They give me a lot of pause when I think about defending my Christianity.
Yeah.
But here's something that I struggle with. And I'd love to ask some of your guests, but I'll ask you. I know that
Sure.
you identify it as an atheist, although you hold that small percentage, like if the plane's going down, you say a prayer just in case, right? So agnostic, atheist, whatever the case might be. So where I get hung up is a few months ago, my wife and I went to see Carrie Underwood in concert, and big arena, 20,000 people. She's singing some of her signature songs, and invariably the crowd starts singing along with her. Jesus Take the Wheel, for example.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, and we've all had those experiences collectively, you feel something.
Yes.
What is that? When
yes.
you fall in love, what is that? Where do those feelings come from? Now, I know that you can reduce those to some remnant of chemicals in your brain that have been part of the evolutionary process.
Yes.
But I don't want to live in a world where that feeling, that love, those feelings that are inexplicable are reduced to a chemical process left over from my evolution. Granted, I don't know everything,
Right.
but the feeling that I had in that moment was phenomenal. And I can't
Right.
explain that.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's a really
What do
good
you do with
question.
that?
So first, I will say that I think that when people feel the Spirit of the Lord and when they feel God, that is a real feeling. I think the feeling that people describe when they're in church and when they're worshiping and when they're praying, I remember singing hymns and feeling that like vibration through your body where you've never felt closer to the people around you and to the Lord your God like ever before. That is a genuine feeling. I don't think that Christians are lying about that because I've personally experienced it. I do think that feeling comes from a biological response. I do think that feeling comes from, human beings are pack animals. We've always been pack animals. We have always sought connection with other human beings in order to survive. One of my previous guests wrote an entire book about how the belief in God has actually been what has kept us alive all these years. I think the belief in God and this image of God, I don't want to say character because I don't mean to be disrespectful, but let's just say for the example character, the character of God, whether it's Allah, whether it's the God we know and the Christian God, whether it's the Aztecs, I did an episode on the Aztec God, that is important for us to survive as a species because we need that connection. We need to feel like there is something watching us and caring for us and making sure that we're okay and making sure that we're safe in order to survive. And whether we are around 1,000 people or whether it is us alone on an island, we have to have that biological connection with a parent of some sort in order to feel the will to live and the will to continue to live because if you are in a desperate situation, and I think this is a little off topic, but I think it's relevant. I think suicide in individuals is when they lose that feeling. They no longer feel loved. They no longer feel that parental figure watching over them. They no longer feel like God from heaven is watching them or cares about them, or anybody earthside cares about them. And I think that is a mental illness that impacts people. And that is a prime example of what happens to human beings biologically when we don't have that feeling anymore, and when we don't have that sense of parental love or God or Christ, right? So
So
I think
where would atheists find that parental feeling then? What would be the source?
Yeah, so in our literal parents, in our community as a whole, in that feeling you experienced at a concert, an atheist would feel that too. We just would not attribute that to God. We would attribute that to knowing our brains are responding in the way that we were made to respond when we feel the comfort of the connection of all of these human beings experiencing this brilliant, beautiful thing together. That's why I think the belief in God is entirely valid. I think the belief in Allah is entirely valid. I don't believe in religions. I don't think that if you say the Hail Mary, that matters. I don't think that people who believe that if they blow up an area with so many infidels that they'll get brides in heaven, I don't think that's true. But I do believe in what we know is the feeling that some people attribute to God and other people attribute to biology. And that's why it's so important to me to talk to people who are both religious and not religious, because I know exactly what people are talking about when they say they felt God, they saw God, they love God, they felt that love and that amazing feeling, because I know what that feels like. And I think it's a beautiful thing. But I do know that it is because of the evolution of the human body, the human mind, chemicals in our brain, our need to develop these parental figures and these familial figures. I think the feeling of God is the same reason that we have fraternities. It's the same reason that we have country clubs. It's the same reason that we have volleyball teams right outside of work, because we experience that really good love group feeling when we are surrounded by other human beings. And it's a biological response that we as human beings have to have in order to survive. Why do you think the pandemic was so hard on human beings? Because for the first time in millennia, we literally could not be within a certain distance of other human beings. We couldn't touch them. We couldn't hug our loved ones. We couldn't experience that biological problem or that biological feeling. And that was the problem. And I think when we hear of people like, oh, they were so happy, how did they kill themselves? Like, they were so pleasant. They were so like wonderful to be around. They were wonderful to be around because they were trying their hardest to recreate that feeling. But something in their brain was miswired and it just won't recreate that feeling. There was some mental illness in their mind that no matter what they did, especially Drew, you and I know in comedy, we find out about so many comedians who died and we're like, oh my God, they were so funny. They were so popular. They were this, they were that. Like, how could that happen? They're trying so hard to establish that relationship and that amazing feeling of love and devotion and group care, and they want to be liked so bad, but for whatever reason there is something in their brain that didn't develop properly or is no longer working properly, and they're not taking the medication to help it, or maybe whatever medication they're on isn't what they need to be on to produce that feeling. So while I do 100% believe you felt that feeling, because I've been there and I felt it, I look at it and I think I am so grateful that my brain and my body and my species has developed in a way that I can feel this feeling anytime I am with a group of people and I love this and I want to share this feeling and I want to give so many people this feeling. And I'm so grateful for evolution allowing me to feel that feeling. Other people, they say, I believe that God gives me that feeling. And I know, based on what I've read, multiple books, that our brains have developed in a way that we believe in gods and how important that belief is. And that's why I have such a high respect for Christians, for Catholics, for Methodists, for anybody who believes in a God. I have a respect for that feeling because I know it's real. And I know for a fact that our brains were built to welcome that feeling and to accept that feeling and to cherish that feeling. And I think it's a wonderful thing to feel that feeling. And your first thought is, I want to share this with as many people as possible. And I think that's what Christianity does. And I think that's what a lot of religions in the beginning intended to do. Now, obviously, there's some denominations who have kind of gone off the rails, like Westboro. I don't have anything to do with them, right? Like I don't claim them. And you have that far like crazy side of every religion that just takes it and like, oh, well, like I'm going to use this as an excuse to bomb people and kill women. And that, if you'll notice, they probably don't feel that happy feeling anymore. And they're probably chasing that feeling and they don't feel good, but they've met a group of people that say, hey, if you do these bad things, we'll like you. So the only way that they can get that acceptance and that, like gangs, they always say like your gang is your family. So you can either be alone or you can have us. And even though you don't agree with a lot of what we do, and even though we get a lot of joy out of doing a lot of bad things to people, you still get that brotherhood feeling, that fatherhood feeling, that familial feeling that all human beings are so desperate for. And if you notice, look at our prisons. How many of those prisoners don't have fathers in their lives? They don't have parents in their lives. I think that goes to show that that is so real, that need for a parental figure, for a father figure, for a love and a leadership is so real that we are literally willing to push our brains to whatever length we have to in order to get that feeling. And we have pushed our brains in directions that have developed different religions and different philosophies. And so while you look at that feeling and you're like, I don't want to live in a world where I attribute that feeling to just being a chemical reaction that I have in my brain, I look at that feeling and I say, that's a chemical reaction I can make in my brain anytime that I want. And not only can I make it anytime that I want, I can share it with people. I can share it with people who do believe in God. I can share it with people who don't believe in God. But I feel an honor and a privilege to know that this is a connection I've been given, whether it's through evolution or whether it's through God. And I want to give that feeling to as many people as I can. And I don't think it's a bummer that it might.
Oh,
say
sorry.
what?
I was gonna say
Yeah.
it's crazy. You literally just preached like half the Bible. Like
Yeah.
I would offer a third perspective. Everything you just said, I agree with 100%. And I agree with it that God put those feelings there.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that there are no chemical reactions, but even in your explanation, you said how our brain was built, how we were made, right? So my argument would be that God built and made you that way to have those, chemical
Yeah.
reactions in your brain. And that it doesn't have to be one or the other, right?
Right.
And that's why I believe that humans have evolved, right? I don't like discount evolution, right? I just think that everything that you said is exactly the mission that we see in the Bible of sharing that feeling and things like that. And even like the need for a parental or father figure, that is literally placed inside of us by God so that we will seek him, because his greatest desire is that we will seek him.
Right.
And so I think everything you just said is 100% accurate about biology of humans and how we've evolved and all those things.
Yeah.
The only caveat I would add from my own perspective and my own belief is that God is the one that placed those there. And I just found it interesting that you use the word built and made in your explanation.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I'm one of those people where I'm like, where did it come from? I can keep following all the way back as far in history as possible. But at the end of the day, as long as Austin is loving this feeling and sharing this feeling and bringing people in to feel that feeling and being that figure for people who are in need, or at least bringing them to a figure, like God, who needs that. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm loving on people and I'm bringing them in and I'm sharing that joy and we're having that experience. We can both have a wonderful time with this amazing feeling and talk all day about where we think it came from or who or what we think built it in the first place. But I think that feeling that you're describing, Scott, is what actually should be bringing atheists and religious people together as opposed to separating us. And, people sometimes I've heard on some, Rooter channels where people are like, oh, they claim they felt God. They claim they felt God. I have felt God. I have felt that feeling. I remember when I would go to the BCM in college and the music would be right and the lighting would be right and the people, we'd just be hugging each other and loving on each other. And it was the most beautiful feeling. And I don't care where it comes from. as long as I'm feeling that, and as long as I'm being a good person, and as long as they're being a good person, and as long as we are sharing that love and we're giving people a place to look when they want to share that feeling as well. And as long as somebody can look at me and have no idea what my beliefs are because I'm just a really nice person and I'm sharing that feeling, I think that's what matters most.
And I think your answer illustrates that just like Christianity, just like every religion, even atheism is a spectrum, because
Yep.
obviously there are atheists that would disagree with you,
Mhm.
because it sounds like all of us agree that it can be a both and not an either or.
Mhm.
And so I think your answer was beautiful. The artistic creative side of me still has an issue with reducing that to a chemical in my brain, but I
Right.
certainly can see the validity of that. And in a lot of ways would agree that a lot of the elements, even that is generated in what we call Christian worship, may not necessarily be reflective of actually worshiping God, but is a chemical or biological response. You mentioned it, to the lighting, to the music, to the atmosphere. So I think you're exactly right.